Well, we open things up here with the 1705 turn. This is kind of interesting. First of all, there's an election. The Habsburg Emperor dies, strangely enough. Very fitting in some ways. I got a dynastic crisis here. You'll see why it's fitting in a moment. I had some other leaders polished off here. The English lost theirs. I think that's the only one that actually fell, but some of them are getting older. They were children still, so their stats are changing. So we're seeing a period where the monarch values are shaking up tremendously compared to normal. All right, beyond that, let's take a look at the events. Special event, the only one that happened to the players that I noted was Russia got cultural expansion. This is one you don't see very often. I think it's very rare on the chart. It gives them a bonus on diplomacy. Any subsidies they get, if they end up putting people in the subsidies box, they're guaranteed to get at least 20 bucks off of it. It's kind of this weird little thing, but whatever. It makes diplomacy a safer aspect for them. And they also get a bonus on colony and trading post placement. It's a sort of weird mixed event. Anyway, after that, what did we get? Well, the first thing I rolled was the 7 Years' War, but that's not allowed because the War of Austrian Succession hasn't happened. Frederick's not on the board, so it can't happen. Great. Okay. So then I get the Treaty of Methuen, which gives England a special bonus on diplomacy towards Portugal. They could pump up their relationship there. It also gives England the ability to start adding trade fleets to areas where Portuguese exist. That's not really an advantage in this game. If the Portuguese had pushed a little further south in Bahia, it would mean the English could place down here. Alternatively, of course, they can just scout out the entire sea zones, which is what Radisson probably should historically be doing to improve England's chances to emplace more merchant fleets. But, hey, you know, the game takes many variances from history. I don't see it as a big deal if I accidentally screwed up with him, as I mentioned last turn. Beyond that, well, the Mughals disappeared. Not a big factor in the game ever, really. They have some events that are triggered that cause, you know, some disruption to the colonization. But their disappearance is important because now it means sepoys can start being built. And that means at least the Dutch, the English, and the French have additional free forces that they can build in India. Right now that's only the Dutch, and nobody's actually playing them. I'm not quite sure how they're going to work as a minor power. I don't think they're allowed to use them. So it's not really a big advantage for anyone right now, although the English, you can see with the Radisson sheet, are kind of placing them. The next one, though, is the big one. War of Austrian Succession breaks out. And that's what's so sort of apt here. So even if there's an election, if the Habsburgs win it, it can be contested at the end of the, well, this war is a contestation of it. And this is essentially the Maria Theresa situation, where unlike in Austria, where she was very accepted historically, well, here we had a dynastic crisis over her coming to the throne, which is kind of neat. The Austrian succession opens some interesting things. First, Prussia and Bavaria declare war on Austria. And then now this also opens it up. France controls them. And as long as it controls them, it can declare war on Austria as well. Now, France doesn't have a lot it can gain against Austria right now, and it doesn't have a lot it can do to help them. This is kind of a twisted situation because normally there might be the threat of some of this territory being Austrian. However, the French could join in and come in through the Tyrol because of their Italian presence. And it is kind of an interesting option. They have a lot of points to gain if Prussia and or Bavaria do well here. They also have a huge army. The rest of the world's not really doing much militarily against them, as we saw last time. The coalition's just not forming. The French could start the war here, or they could sit on their heels. Sitting on their heels might be good because they've got a lot of points right now, but England has this capacity for producing points. Helping the Prussians is definitely of interest to the French, but if they do so, that means the English are allowed to join the war. All right, Interesting enough there. The final event, there were 4 this turn, remember sometimes on a roll of 0 that can happen, was more of these slave revolts. And now everything in the Caribbean, including the brand new English colony, has broken into revolt. Now this is kind of, gotten silly, but the English can actually intervene in this one where they can't get down and handle the other one that they were facing. The Spanish may have a chance at hitting this one early as well. They've got enough manpower on the board that they can probably throw some troops in. But we've got to think real hard here, because Austria may be requesting aid from Spain in the diplomacy phase. I'm not sure how much aid Spain can give against Prussia and or Bavaria, but against France, I think Austria will call them in. And another alternative is, hey, the Turks saw this kind of anti-Turkish move by the Austrians, and they've kind of responded to it, but it may be that this is the time they have to take the war back to Austria. Seems like the strongest position for them to do so at this moment. And so I would not be at all shocked to see the Turks declaring war at this point. The French also interested in it, and this is the bad point of taking the Austrians instead of staying with the Dutch. The Dutch have no enemies, Yeah, they might be able to produce decent points, but the Austrians are a riskier position. Of course, the Dutch weren't going to win with the Dutch. They weren't going to make up the points that France has. They were behind England, so no way they were going to make up those points. So their only option was to take this high-risk option. I think there's no chance of making as many points with the Austrians, but we'll see. Maybe they do fantastic here. Anyway, right now it looks like the world's built a coalition against them, and the diplomacy phase, we'll see for sure how this all breaks out, but I would not be shocked to see everybody jumping into this war. Alright, so war broke out everywhere from this. France and Turkey both wanted to go in, for the reasons I discussed. France went in on their own with their free casus belli, fine. The Turks could have allied with France to get in a little cheaper. They're taking a 10-point victory point penalty. They took a 2 stability loss to enter this war. But by doing so, France told them, look, I don't know why you'd want to. I'd love to have you in this war. I don't need you, but I'd love to. But here's the thing. I'm going to support Bavarian and Prussian claims. And you're not going to get many territories if I win it on my side. However, Austria is going to be weak. You want Austrian territory. Pummeling Austria can only be for the good of both of us. I'm getting this huge bonus. At this point, we'd be cementing kind of our feelings together. Let's, please come in, but I'm warning you, don't come in as my ally. That's not going to help you. All right, well, not surprisingly, the English came in on this as well with their free casus belli. This is really a hurt France scenario for them, and it's going to be kind of tough for them because they don't have the ability to do a lot of harm in the rest of the world. They don't have those leaders yet. Those don't come until the 7 Years' War, where both sides start getting a lot of leaders down there. And the English army is kind of at its height right now. But when you got, Marlborough, and you got the Royal Marines, I think, still, although I'm not positive they're still on the board now. You still got William III, though. Weird. He's dead. At least the leader that represented him's dead. But I keep the leader on the board because it doesn't hurt. Oh no, there are the Royal Marines. So yeah, when you have Marlborough, when you have the Royal Marines, you have so many good leaders. Yes, the French do too, and you don't want to face them head on. But the French may have other problems. And those other problems were going to come down to, look, I got Swedes, Portuguese, Lorraine, Holland. Well, the only one that made it in was Lorraine. And they're not taking full entry in war. They're just taking the Expeditionary Corps. It'll be a slight help, but, the English were counting on their allies being a lot stronger. Now, they could still come in. And they spent some points with their die roll to get the Portuguese up another level so they can bring them in. Turks were unable to get allies. The Spanish managed to bring Württemberg in, which isn't going to do them a lot of good either. And did anybody else do anything interesting? I don't think anybody else got involved in this particular little bit of enjoyment. But you can see, you know, as soon as the stability gets up, hey, it's time to go to war again. You know, I can actually afford it, and countries were able to bulk up their militaries to get ready for this, even in that one turn of peace or whatever. All right, I guess we go on, and I'll do the administrative stuff. I forgot one more. Venice is intervening in Austria's favor. Now, this is kind of the problem. The Turks would have liked to have actually directly just attacked Venice. And they couldn't do that. And now they've got the Venetian Navy opposing them, but not. And then the other thing is the Austrians called the Spaniards in, but they didn't call them in against the French. They only called them in against the Turks. The Spanish were still wavering on that because they were down here, and now they're down here, and they may not be able to last very long. But the Austrians said, look, if you want to take the Turks on, we've got to do it now, because I've got to move against France at some point. And I need your help. You'll be able to distract them. It'll hurt them. And that's what you want, right? And Spain's kind of like, yeah, but I want to keep my country in good shape. Well, if this doesn't go too poorly, you might be able to gain some of your territories back. The Venetian Navy's out there again. We'll see how it works. And Spain kind of agreed to it, but, you know, they're in such bad shape that I don't know how much help they can really be. All right, well, we finished the administrative actions, and wow, the power that can be brought to bear again. We've seen this before, but French army, nearly at full strength. They're down one army. They've been building up as hard as they can, but I realized they hadn't deployed an army yet. But they've been building as many infantry as they could. Last turn without paying an overage. And this turn they paid double, up to double price. But they filled everything up, including the colonial army down here, planning on really trying to win things against the English. The English built up their navy primarily but it's not all that big. They built an additional navy up here. They can build it in their full colonies with the intention of shipping an army over. Now they thought, gee, the French aren't going to be able to afford it. Well, they were kind of wrong. The French took out a fair-sized loan, $100, no biggie there. But they also did an exceptional tax, another $140. So they got a little bit more. I don't think the English went into debt. Let me just check this. I don't think the English actually broke down and took out a loan, no. So that's probably their big flaw for this war. They could have built a bigger navy. Right now, they're facing a bigger French-European navy than they have. They also are facing a lot of French naval leaders, most of which have been sent out to go privateering. And this is the scary thing. We got 4 French privateers. You normally can only have 1, but when you have leaders, you can cover them up with additional ones. They were able to get all theirs out. This is really the heyday of the French letters of marque, where the French decided they can't win the naval battles necessarily, but they can win the commerce and affect England's commerce that way. Well, they're going to get to try that out. The English have 1 privateer. Nice big armies. Austrian armies at full strength. We've actually got additional units in the detachments everywhere. Prussia got a good roll, filled up its army. Bavaria can't fill up its army. It doesn't have space to do so, so they increased as much as they could. But everything seems prepared to really go into this major clash here. This one stack of leaders here for the French is under Eugene. We've got Savoy. We've got Vauban there. We've got just such a modifier on any siege attempt that the way I run the siege things, they should be able to start taking Austrian cities like nothing. And up here we have the much, much weaker Catinat. Unfortunately, the French have 2 A-level leaders who really suck, and they got lucky in getting Eugene or Eugen, if you'd rather, depending on who's talking about him. Weakness for the French, they can't really defend this easily. They've got these thoughts of maybe breaking off part of their navy if they can defeat the English navy, but they don't know that that's terribly likely. They also have all this force to bring to bear from the Prussians, and those are a serious influence on this. Austria's in a lot of trouble here. They're facing a French army with no desire to make demands, except for Prussia and perhaps Bavaria, but they're also facing this Turkish army, and they just don't have enough pieces to handle it all. France, well, I mean, it's not like they're tiny. They're sitting on 5 army counters. France only has 6, and we're able to handle a 3-way war. But it's just a little too little, and they're facing some big armies here. The French army is tremendous in size, and they've got a reserve army up here, which is meant to handle the English, who presumably are going to land, say, at Bray or something, because anywhere else gets you a little too close to Catinat's army. Make him march across France, and then maybe land a second army down in Calais area, and really kind of try to put the pressure on there. Spaniards have a problem that I didn't note before, which is Algeria came into the war. I forgot to roll for them and did it as a backup, basically. That's going to cause some problems. They're only Expeditionary Corps, but they have a navy, and they're going to kind of threaten the Spanish navy, which is split up. We've got a modern navy here and an old galley fleet here that they'd like to add to their navy because it adds to the casualties they can cause. Actually, a split fleet like that isn't a bad thing at all, because you get these additional casualties and added to your roll, as long as they're not your frontline units. But the galleys aren't going to take the casualties unless the fleet is defeated completely. Alright, well, I guess we're ready to rock into this, and this is a scary, scary looking war. And it's also, you know, we're kind of running down the clock here. By the French entering this war and pushing this one, they think they can win this one. Spain's not involved in it. The Dutch aren't in this yet. Even though they're facing the other 2 major enemies, they may be able to knock Austria back far enough that Austria can't really join another war as easily. And then it just becomes the war that France is willing to do, which is them against England in this single struggle. England had to join this. As soon as France pops into it, England's saying, well, you know, we can't allow the Austrians to be stripped and France to gain those victory points, so we have to try to stop them here, but I don't know what the likelihood is of that. Anyway, onward. Alright, it's the first round. Let's see what happens. First of all, these Bavarians. Max Emanuel's army has been defeated, and he's going to run up and join the Prussians to try to work with them. I can actually shift some French leaders over to Prussia too, but no real reason for that as far as I can see. Alright, what do we got? Yeah, I forgot to move some French. These guys have to come. River line 2. This is fully integrated. 4, 5, 6 for river line, no good. Can't quite make it without making an attrition roll. Alright. And I forgot to roll the Spanish treasure fleet, but we'll do that. English positioned themselves to sail their troops back into the North American colonies in order to have a chance of facing the French leader there. This causes them a problem because their navy's split, and they actually took some attrition, but Rooke's their best leader, which meant when the French sailed up, now the English managed to kill off some of those privateers coming out, but when the French sailed up, the English chose to flee, and they got a lucky roll on that. Otherwise, with their split fleet, they were in trouble, especially with the leadership where it was. Let's see. What else? The English managed to land the Duke of York down here, and he's got the bonus Royal Marines. That was enough. Bray fell. Now, here's the thing. The siege rolls, the current leaders have such high siege values in some cases, especially during this war. Later, those go down, well, this period. Later, those go down back to about where we're used to. The things kind of fall quicker. And we'll see that here, where in the Tyrol, it fell immediately. Now, that ended up being a breach, and I actually fought that out because I'm trying to get Bavaria free. The Habsburgs' only real offensive move was to slide into Bavaria. They defeated Max Emanuel and laid siege to it. They also got a breach and could have gone in. They may have to this next round because the French are putting such pressure on them. The Turks slid up into Serbia, again, only doing one space at a time. Nobody's got the money for the multiple campaign things. That differs when you're dealing in the New World or in the rest of the world map. But the Habsburgs just positioned themselves here in order to try to limit the damages there, because their main goal is knock Bavaria out first. And now, well, now they're going to be facing the French down there too. They're facing just too many enemies. Up here, however, Dessau went into Schlesien and was driven back by an interception by Stauffenberg, and that was successful for them there. The Algerian navy got beaten back by the Spanish, so the Spanish are going to be able to move into place. I forgot another fleet that's got to run through. These things I got to try to remember to do. Anyway, there's no one really in the way here. These Venetians are not at war with France, they're only at war with Turkey. And likewise the Spanish one, I don't think there's anybody really in the way there. Alright, second round ends, and we get Catanau, who has to be given this. Alright, how do we try to make sense out of this? So I screwed up with the Turks. I had them sieging Serbia, which they already own. They would have been in Banat. The Austrians would have moved forward as they did. Going into that, well, the siege of Banat completed. Capruli defeated the Austrians here and is now sieging Sarajevo. And Ludwig made an attack to try to dislodge the Turks. That failed, and he was pushed back, not with huge losses. Over here, the French succeeded in their siege of Innsbruck. Stauffenberg completed his siege as well. Bavaria is gone, and that means the French can't go in there. Well, Eugene had already completed his siege, so he had nowhere really to go. If he pushes forward into one of these directions, he won't be in supply. So he's got kind of this worry with the Austrians up there. He's got to deal with them, but they're in territory he can't deal with. So as long as that army stays there, he's kind of paralyzed. Over here, Marlborough came down, got hit by, I think, Catanau, and won the battle. He had one calf strength point remaining at the end of it, at which point Catanau is gone and Berwick comes in and destroys him and kills him. So it's kind of a dark day for the English there, and it gets worse because their navy was destroyed here trying to slip through with these other troops to get to Calais, and most of their army went down with it. So now the English really aren't a factor except over here in the colonies, and there they were able to beat off the French and hold them away. But the big advantage, the Marlborough edge, that's gone. That's huge. The Royal Marines, I think, are temporarily out of play. They can come back next turn, except, yeah, they'll still be around next turn. Russians made it down to Armor. Elsewhere, I don't know much else. The Prussians. Yeah, the Prussians marched into Schlesien again, and this time they came out definitely the winners, but not of the battle, and had to be pushed back, but they really trounced the Austrian army, and now the Austrians really don't have enough there to face them, but they do have a couple more detachments, so they can build up a new army there and try to face the Prussians with that combined force. It's not really enough. The Austrians are really, really pressed on every side, and it's ugly. Okay, well, the turn's ending. An interesting little note here. Nothing much happening here. The French attacking across this into Maryland, and again getting repulsed. They may be doing the better of the job, but it's not getting them much. Spanish siege of Sardinia continues. We see the Turks pushing deeper into Austria. The French held off because they needed to clear out Bray, which they've done. Massive French fleet up here. I mean, the English have been pretty much knocked out of the war, at least for this turn, so they're glad to see it ending. Look at the French coming down to try to deal with some of the privateers. That's going to weigh heavier on the English, but it does take away the French who have this desire to win the Mediterranean Trade Center. Here's the thing, though. If the English take as heavy a losses as I think, and there's so many Dutch ships out there, I gotta be careful because the Atlantic Trade Center may go over to the Dutch. And at this point, the Habsburg player is saying, shit, I should have stayed. Prussians succeeded in breaking their way into Schlesien, and they also managed to lay siege to it, enough so that they'd be able to continue. For this, really, the Turks and the French would have liked this to be a nice, long, meaty turn. Austrians are happy to see it's not. English are very happy to see it's not. Okay, I guess we go on to all the administrative stuff at the end of the turn. And we're pushing into the 1710 turn up in the second part of the turn track. Very, very briefly. Spain came to a white peace with Turkey. Simple reason, the way their stabilities were, Spain was down here, Turkey here. And there was just no way. Spain's unable to get itself out of the must surrender next turn hole very easily with their leadership, etc. So there was almost no chance of them gaining anything. The other thing is, this is a game of perceptions. For example, the English perceive they can't win this war anymore because they don't have the, or they perceive they had enough force and enough money and went in with the war without going into debt. And that was a mistake. Now they're staying in because of potential allies like the Holland and Sweden. I'm going to cut this real quick. Probably talk a little bit more on the next one, but I don't want to use up time.